Min Yi from Pearson, and
Hi, I'm Gladys. So we have another team member, but he couldn't be here with us today. Yeah, so it's just the two of us.
so what is Pearson? So basically, the idea of Pearson actually came from my experience working as a student volunteer, volunteering with the Student Nightline when I was in the UK. So it's a listening service that is peer run. So it's run by students for students at night when mental well-being services on campus are not available. So it's totally anonymous and it's confidential, and it's they don't volunteers don't judge the colors, and um, so for us we're actually planning to implement this in the local universities, and we are targeting students from probably NTU, NUS, SMU. So why a peer run service? Because it's much easier sometimes for peers to speak to each, for people to speak with their friends rather to speak with an adult, because sometimes adults might give you a lot of advice which you might not necessarily need, because all you need is just a listening ear. So our progress so far, we have conducted a simple survey and got about 30 responses from students, mostly from NUS, NTU, and SMU. And most of them actually value anonymity quite a lot. And they also reflect that they actually speak to their peers when they need someone to talk to. So yeah, so imagine, as a student, late at night, you have some personal issues and you have no one to speak to. So this is what our service is all about.
Okay, so moving on to the implementation plan. So we are intending to actually work with the current student volunteers within the school's well-being and services organizations to actually recruit these volunteers to kickstart our initiative. So we are also intending to work with the school's psychology team, psychology department, to actually help us to conduct talks for our volunteers, as well as to be a source of mental support for our volunteers as well. So we will also work with our training providers to come up with a set of SOPs as a framework to actually guide our volunteers if our volunteers meet with any circumstances during the engagement, such as distress calls, suicide calls, prank calls, inappropriate calls, etc. Okay, milestone planning. So unlike some of the groups, so our group, we actually just started our journey in NYC. So we actually started work only in late last year. So late last year was when we actually dived deep into the problem. And also we conducted our survey and interviews where we actually validated our audience group as well as validated our concept idea. And then this year, January, we spoke with the different training providers and we told them about our idea. And some of them were actually very interested to work with us and they provided subsidized training for us as well. So February 2022 and beyond, we are going to actually recruit volunteers from the different well-being organizations in the different schools, and then to also, test out some of the demand for this service and to get buy-ins from the student welfare and the student body, and then to run this as a pilot test for 1 semester. Okay, so for this, I'll just skip this slide because of time constraint. So measure of success, so we have a few pointers. So the first pointer is if the number of participants who called our service find this as very useful and a help in the mental well-being. So for this, we are intending to actually have a feedback form embedded in our website and on our Instagram and social media pages. And then we at least have 100 calls, excluding prank and inappropriate calls received during the pilot test, which is about to run during one semester. So this is to ensure that there are enough people who actually know about Pearson and that people actually find this service useful enough to actually call in. And then the third point would be that we are able to actually recruit 30 student volunteers during the pilot run. So this is to ensure that we have a ready pool of volunteers that actually believe in our idea. And then to be able to collaborate with established organizations to provide subsidized training and workshops for our student volunteers. And also, most importantly, we're able to actually gain buy-ins from at least one institution to actually run this as a pilot test. Okay, so this is the estimated budget that we have. So mainly the bulk of our budget goes into training the volunteers to actually equip them with active listening and empathy skills. So actually, the budget that we catered is actually in consultation after we spoke with the different training providers. So this is the amount that we got. So this will be a comfortable amount to actually train at least 30 student volunteers. And then we have a bit of money catered for student volunteer welfare. So for instance, when they're engaged throughout the night, we might get them some coffee, tea, and some light snacks. And also $500 for publicity and marketing, like printing of posters, volunteer t-shirts, etc. So actually, the ideal state is that we are able to actually get Pearson to be part of the university's CCA or clubs so that it can be sustainable and self-run in the longer term. But we just need that bit of funding to actually push to help us run for the first year. Yeah. So with that, we have come to the end of our presentation. Thank you very much.
All right. Thank you, Team Pearson, sorry. Okay, judges?
So yeah, I'll do a quick one. I think first I just want to say I like the idea of really providing and that you learn it. I mean, kind of like you had experience in Nightline, right? So when I saw this idea, I think when I was looking it up, the first idea was Nightline, right? Associations in UK as well. And I think my two questions, I think first is like, why these schools in particular? NUS, NTU, and SMU. At Limitless, I train schools, peer supporters, right? And I've known that this tree school has very strong peer support networks, right? And so that's something just to think about. Why this tree school in particular? Second one is, how is your service different in that sense from SOS Care Text, right? So SOS has 24/7 care text now, right? That runs through the night for people. And most of them, those who use texting are youths, right? As well as those who provide the service, actually the volunteers are mostly that too. So yeah, just curious.
Okay, so to answer your second question first, why Pearson is different from other hotlines is that it is not an emergency hotline. You don't call Pearson only when you're feeling suicidal or you're desperate to talk to someone, but it could be as simple as you have an issue and you don't feel comfortable talking to anyone. It's more like a preventive than like I'm in great distress and desperately need someone to talk to. So it's different from other hotlines where you might call in because there's a purpose of why you're calling in. And to answer your first question, sorry, could you repeat the first question again?
Why NUS, NTU, SMU? Yeah, I mean, why do you all select these three schools?
I think initially our idea was mainly more focused on NUS, NTU, mainly because they have campus accommodations for students. And for many students, it's probably the first time they move away from home and probably living alone, having to deal with many things. And the loneliness that you feel being alone away from home and stuff like that, sometimes you might need someone to speak to. And maybe as a first year student or as a new student, you might not have someone that you might trust enough to speak to.
And to add on, we actually did analysis of the different well-being services in the three organizations, NUS, NTU, and SMU. So we realized that there was a gap because a lot of these services, they are not available throughout the night. So a lot of them just end at 8 or 10, or some of them are stationed inside within the school's well-being services, which ends around 6 or 5 p.m. So we thought that our service can be there to actually fill in the gap when no, other schools or campuses or campus services are available, then our service can be there to fill in the gap. Yeah.
Yeah, so just to follow up on the question about the caller profile, right? So if your line is different from the other helplines out in the community, what if someone calls you and that person is suicidal? Are you going to stop that conversation and say, sorry, we cannot continue? You may have to call another line? That's one question. The second question is, what if you receive a caller who tells you, I am going to kill myself now? What is your protocol and what are you going to do about those messages that you hear from your line?
That was a very good question, and this is actually something that we are still in the process of working on, because besides training volunteers to be able to handle different types of calls, we will also have to provide them with SOPs for the different type of calls. So if you get this type of call, how do you handle it? What are some things you can say, and what are some things you should avoid saying, and whether or not you should refer this person to a different helpline or different resources. Yeah. I hope that answers your question.
Did you mention that there's any partnership with the existing sort of like not help desk, like the SOS line and things like that already? Because I think following to Anita's question is that maybe you need to collaborate with them, that if there's these emergency like calls, right? They you act as an extension, right? Then you can refer them back or something like that.
These are some very fine minor details that we are still currently trying to work out and iron out. Yeah.
Okay, thanks.